1 minute. I started early trying to post some things on the other line, so I'm officially not started yet. And it is now 7 o'clock. So, hello, cats and kittens. I am here to read at you and hoping to entertain or amuse or at least distract you all for a short period of time. I've done my best to post things around so that people can make sense out of this. I'm still figuring out the technology. I've only been on Facebook since like 2009 or something, and just now, figuring out how to do live broadcasts. Obviously, if I had any sense whatsoever and were any kind of self-promoter, I would have figured all this out years ago, and I had to wait until there was a worldwide pandemic crisis. Yes, I'm wearing my Evolution shirt. I will show you all here today. Evolution is a very cool store. I don't know how many branches they have, but the one in Manhattan is the one that I've been to, and it's just super excellent. It's full of skeletons and preserved critter bits and all kinds of really cool stuff. So if you get a chance to get there when it's open again, I don't know if it's open, or you can probably look it up online. It's a very, very fine place. I was first introduced to it by my publisher, Betsy Walheim, and have made a point of going to go see it every time I can when I'm in Manhattan. So very cool stuff. And I hope you are all doing well. I see that you guys are getting the live feed there, which is always a reassurance to me in the middle of all these things. So as the last few times before this, one of the times and two of the times, I guess I had problems getting it online. So we seem to be on. I will be doing some reading. It's not as long a story tonight. So because of that, I will try to see if I can go to the comments section later on, and maybe we will answer some questions if any of you want to post questions. As a matter of fact, if any of you are commenting at the moment and do want to put in a question, you could actually just write question like in caps and then put your question after it. And then I can go quickly through it if I have some time and see what there is. So that's a suggestion. But we don't have to do questions or anything. I'm happy to read and chat a little bit if it works out or whatever. Oh, there's a cat in the background. That is our cat, Lily. Whoops, sorry, wrong way around. That over there. Whoops. It's hard to figure out how to point properly from these angles. But anyway, over there, that is our cat, Lily. Lily, say hello. Lily is one of our many rescue animals. And she, now that our other cat has passed on and has departed for the fields beyond, Lily is now my only companion in the office, and she has benefited from this. I think I have benefited from it, but she's a sweetie. And hello, baby. Right now I'm online, so I'm not going to brush you. She's very big into being brushed. Anyway, so hello again. Welcome. It is Sunday. I think today is the 19th. So for those of you who are just about to fire up, no, it's not 4:20 till tomorrow. But hey, don't let me stop you. And I am here. This is, I think, our fourth or fifth week of being more or less quarantined, although the last time we left the house was over a month ago to do anything other than emergency stuff. We on my birthday, which was March 14th, we actually went out. That was like the last time we went to any public places and did any public stuff. And so we've been hanging out here for a while. We haven't killed each other. No Lizzie Borden action yet, although I'm sure I'll be the first to go when that happens, because everybody who knows me knows how much I talk, and I'm sure that most of the world is absolutely sick and tired of hearing me. And here you poor people are, and you have chosen to come and listen to me. So anyway, I am going to read a story tonight. The story I'm going to read I don't think this was ever printed in anybody else's anthology, so I um, can't advertise anybody else's anthology. This was published in a book that we did, well, that Deborah particularly was in charge of publishing, called A Stark and Wormy Night. And it's a collection of short stories by me. And in fact, that's the story I'm going to read. So before I start, I'm just going to give you a couple of quick words of explanation. This was written for the pure joy of playing with the language and the words. There may be a couple of places where, because it was written and not originally spoken, where some of the really irritating puns or weird jokes or usages or whatever may not be as clear as they would be if you read them. So please feel free to go out and find a copy of the story and read it, because I think you get even more out of it that way. The other thing which I was going to tell you is, one of the interesting things about being a writer, and probably any kind of creative person at all, is that one does not always know what one's source material is or what one's inspiration is, sometimes until long after you've written something. And many of my readers who've come to see me do readings, especially back in the early part of the 2000s in Europe, when I was doing a lot of Otherland readings, will know that I used to say that Otherland was inspired by an interview I heard on NPR, which is National Public Radio, with the author of A River Runs Through It, who I believe was Norman Maclean, and that I had said, thinking of rivers as metaphors made me think about, what if a river was truly metaphorical, meaning it did not exist except as an idea? And in part, this led to the writing of the Otherland books. And then one day, one evening, I was standing in front of a bunch of people in Germany somewhere, and I suddenly started to explore. Somebody said, "Where did Otherland come from? Where did the idea come from?" And I suddenly said, I started to give them my spiel on what I remembered. And then I suddenly went, "Oh my God, I'm totally lying to you." I mean, not lying, because it actually had the Norman Maclean interview had a big influence on the books. But I said, no, but that's not where it originally came from. Where these books originally came from was the Disneyland fairy tale boat ride when I was like 6 years old. And I went to Disneyland, and you get on this tiny little boat with this extremely bored looking Snow White with a microphone. And you go down this tiny little rivery thing. Those of you who've been there know, but I'm explaining for those who haven't. You go down this tiny little rivery thing, and along the banks there are all these little miniature castles and mansions and things like that, and little elements that go with them. Like, you can see Rat from Wind in the Willows. You see Rat's house with his little boat bobbing at anchor, just right next to them on the river, and all this stuff. And of course, being a little kid, I was just totally taken by all these little tiny things. I loved those. And even though Snow White was clearly like thinking about what she was going to do after work, and she was doing this kind of like, and look, there is Alice's house. Alice will have some wonderful adventures down a rabbit hole. For 6-year-old me, this was a huge deal. This was like the Guns of Navarone or Star Wars, or like, whoa, I love this. So anyway, I came to realize after the fact, don't worry, this all makes sense. I came to realize after the fact that was a much bigger influence than the Norman Maclean metaphorical river, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the reason I mention this is because literally today, as I was looking through the story I'm going to read, which is called A Stark and Wormy Night, and is sort of Cod Joycean, in the sense that it plays with language quite a bit, and is kind of silly with language, which is why I wrote it and how I wrote it. But, I was thinking, that sounds slightly familiar, this kind of feeling of this conversation in the book, in the story. And then I suddenly realized, oh my God, it's not literally, but it's inspired by the comic strip Pogo from when I was growing up. And of course, Pogo was a wonderful, wonderful cartoon. It's actually where my name comes from because I was born Robert. But when I was little, in Pogo, all these creatures live in the Okefenokee Swamp in the South, American South, and they speak this Southern dialect. But it's also Walt Kelly, the creator and writer and artist of Pogo, loved to play with the language. So they part of the joy of Pogo is that the language is so absurd and wonderful. So it was only today, and I wrote the story some maybe 20 years ago, maybe 15, 18 years ago, I don't know. But it was only today, as I was rereading the story, that I realized, oh my God, that was an influence from my childhood, and the same place my name, Tad, comes from, because in Pogo, in this kind of silly fake Southernism, they refer to the little animals because they're all animals. There Pogo's a possum, and there's Albert Alligator, and Churchy La Femme, the turtle, and all that. But they call the little animals Tads. Like, oh, there's Ms. Raccoon and her Tads. So when I was small, as far as I know, I was the Tad, and it just kind of stuck. And by the time I knew I had a name, Tad was it. So the only people who ever call me Robert were substitute teachers when I was in school, and later on were telemarketers, which is always a dead giveaway. So when anybody calls up and I pick up the phone and they go, "Hi, Robert," or Rob, or Bob, my first impression is, you don't know me. You don't know anything about me, which was okay. It's kind of useful. Anyway, so now that I have explained all of this stuff and wasted, a good 10 minutes or so, I am going to actually read the story. And it is a dragon and knight story, right? It's a knight and a dragon story with a slight difference, as you'll hear. So anyway, so from this collection named after this story, A Stark and Wormy Night, I am reading A Stark and Wormy Night. Ma'am, squeaked Alexandrax from the depths of his straw-stoned nesty. Us can't sleep. Tell us a tell of ye elder days. Child, stop that howling, or you'll be the death of me, scowled his scaly forebearer. Count sheeps and go to sleep. Been counting shepherds instead, have us, her eggling rejoined, but too toothsome they each look. Us are hungry, ma'am. Hungry? Told you not to swallow that farm tot so swift. A soiled and feisty little thing it was, but would you stop to chew careful-ish? Oh, no. You're not hungry, child. You simply gobbled too fast and dazzled your eat pipes. Be grateful that you've only got one head to sleepify, unbelike some of your knobful ancestors, and go back and shove yourself snorewise. But us can't sleep, ma'am. Us feels all grizzled in the gut and wiggly in the wings. Preach us some storying, please. Something sightful but sleepable, back from the days when there were long, dark nights. Nights? Nights! You'll scare yourself sleepless with such. No nights there are any more. Just wicked little winglings like you who will not wooze when they should. Just one short storying, ma'am. Tell us somewhat of great-grandpap, the one that were named Alexandrax, just like us. He were alive in the bad old days of bad old nights. Yes, that he was, but far too sensible and cave-proud to go truckling with such clanking monstrosities. Although, hissed my dragonlet, my eggling, it's true there was one time. Tell! His ma'am sighed a sparkling sigh. Right then, but curl yourself tight and eruberate that tale, my lad. That'll keep you quelled and quiet whilst I storify. Well, as I've often told with pride, your great-grandpap were known far-flown and wide-spanned for his good sense. Not for him the errors of others, especially not the promiscuous plucking of princesses. Since your great-grandy reckoned full well how likely that was to draw some clumbering, lanking knight in a shiny suit with a fistful of sharp steel worm's bane. Oh, those were frightsome days, with knights lurking beneath every scone and round every bent, ready to spring out and spear some mother's son for scarce no cause at all. So did your wisdominical great-grandpap confine himself to ploughhards and peasant girls and the plump occasional parish priest tumbled down drunk in the churchyard of a Sunday evening, shagged out from cessed sermonizing. Princesses and such got noticed, you see, but the primate proletariat were held cheap in those days. A dragon, a dozen or so, could be harvested in one area before a dragon had to wing on to pastures new. And your great-grandpap, he knew that. Made no mistakes, did he? Could tell an overdressed merchant missus from a true damager duchess even by the shallowest starlight. Plucked the former, but shunned the latter every time. Still, like all of us, he wondered what it was that made a human princess so very tasty and attractive. Why did they need to be so punishingly, paladinishly protected? Was it the creaminess of their savor or the crispiness of their crunch? Perhaps they bore the bouquet, as those fancy French wyverns has it, of flowery flavors to which no peat-smoked peasant could ever aspire. Or were it something entire different, he pondered, inexplicable except by the truthiest dint of personal mastication? Still, even in these moments of weakness, your grandpap's pap knew that he were happily protected from his own greeding nature by the scarcity of princessly portions, owing to their all being firmly pantried in castles and other stony such. He was free to speculate because foolish, droolish chance would never come to a cautious fellow like him. Ah, but he should have quashed all that quandering, my little lizarding, instead of letting it simmer in his brain boiler, because there came a day when luck and lust met and bred and brooded a litter named Lamentable. That is to say, your pap's grandpap stumbled on an unsupervised princess. This royal hairless was a bony and brainless thing, it goes without saying, and overfond of her clear complexion, which was her downfalling, although the actual was more of an uplifting, as you'll see. It was her witless wont at night to sneak out of her bed betimes and wiggle her skinny shanks out the window, then ascend to the roof of the castle to moonbathe, which this princess was convinced was the secret of smoothering skin. Which it may well have been, but who in the name of Claude Almighty wants smoothed skin? No wonder that humans have grown so scarce these days. They wanted wit. In any case, on this particularly odd even, she had just stretched herself out there in her nightgown to indulge this lunar tick when your great-grandpap happened to flap by overhead on his way back from a failed attempt at tavern keeper tartar in a nearby town. He took one look at this princess, stretched out like the toothsomest treat on a butcher's table, and his better sense deserted him. He swooped scoopishly down and snatched her up, then wung his way back toward his cavern home, already menurizing a stuffing of baker's crumbs and a coddle of toddler as a side dish, when the princess suddenly managed to get a leg free and in the midst of her struggling and unladylike cursing, kicked your great-grandpap directly in the vent as hard as she could, causing him unhappiness and almost unhemipenis. Yes, dragons had such things even way back then, foolish fledgling. No, your great-grandpaps wasn't pranged for permanent. Where do you think your grandpap came from? In any case, so shocked and hemi-pain was he by this attack on his ventral sanctity that he dropped the foolish princess most sudden and vertical, 100 sky fathoms or more, into a grove of pine trees which left her rather careworn, and also fairly conclusively dead. Still, even cold princess seemed toothsome to your great-grandpap, so he gathered her up and went on home to his cavern. He was lone and bachelorn in those days, your great-grandmammy still in his distinct future, So there was none to greet him there and none to share with, which was how he liked it, selfish old miser that he was even in those dewy-clawed days. He had just settled in, exceedingly slobberful at the teeth and tongue, and about to have his first princessual bite ever, when your grandpap's pap heard a most fearsome, full, clatternacious clanking and baying outside his door. Then someone called the following in a rumbling voice that made your GG's already bruised ventrality try to shrink up further into his interior. "O vile beast, stealer of maiden princesses, despoiler of virgins, curse of the kingdom, come ye out and face Sir Libogran, the undeflectable." It were a night. It were a big one. Well, when he heard this hewing cry, your great-grandpap flished cold as a snowdrake's bottom all over. See, even your cautious great-grandy had heard tell of this Libogran, a terrible, stark, and wormy knight, perhaps the greatest dragonbane of his age, and a dreadsome boar on top of it. "Yes, it is I, Libogran," the knight bellows on while your G's G got more and more tremful. "Slayer of Alisalax the Iron-Scaled, and Batwing Beerbung, destroyer of the infamous Black Worm of Flimpsy Meadow, and scuttler of all the noisome plans of Fubarg the Flameful." On and on he went, declaiming such a drawed-out Dracologue of death that your great-grandpap was pulled almost equal by impatience as terror. But what could he do to make it stop? A sudden idea crept upon him then, catching him quite by surprise. He was a young dragon, after all, and unused to thinking, which in those days were held dangerous for the inexperienced. He snicked quietly into the back of his cave and fetched the princess, who was a bit worse for wear, but still respectable enough for a dead human, and took her to the front of the cavern, himself hide-bound in shadows as he held her out in the light and dangled her, puppet-wise, where the knight could see. "Princess," cried Libogran, "your father has sent me to save you from this irksome worm. Has he harmed you?" "Oh, no!" shrilled your great-grandpap in his most high-pitchful princessly voice. "Not at all! This noble dragon has been naught but gentle manifold, and I am come of my own freed will. I live here now, do you see? So you may go home without killing anything and tell my papa that I am as happy as a well-burrowed scale might." The knight, who had a face as broad and untroubled by subtle as a porky haunch, stared at her. "Are you truly certain you are well, princess?" quoth he, "because you look a bit battered and dirtsome, as if you had perhaps fallen through the branches of several pine trees." "How nosy and nonsensical you are, silly knight," piped your great-grandpap, a bit nervous-like. "I was climbing in the tops of a few trees, yes, as I love to do. That is how I met my friend, this curtainous dragon. We were both bird nesting in the same tree, la, and ha-ha. And then he kindly invited me to his home, toward whence I incompulsively came, and where I am so happily visiting." Things went on in this conversational vein for some little time, as your great-grandpap labored to satisfy the questioning of the dreaded dragon slayer. He might even have eventually impacted the bold knight's withdrawal, except that in a moment of particular violent puppeteering, your great-grandsire, having let invention get the best of him while describing the joyful plans of the putative princess, managed to dislodge her head. She had not been the most manageable marionette to begin with, and now your great-grandpap was particular difficult in trying to get her to pick up and re-neck her lost knob with her own hands, while still disguising his clawed handiwork at the back, controlling the action. "Whoops! And girlish giggle!" he cried in his best mock princessable tone, scrabbling panicked after her rolling tiara stand. "Silly me! I always said it would fall off if it were attached to me, and now look at this! Popped right off its stem. Oh, la, I suppose I should be a bit more rigor mortis about my grooming and attaching. Sir Libegram, the undeflectable, stared at what must clearly have been a somewhat extraordinary sight. Highness, quoth he, I cannot help feeling that someone here is not being entirely honest with me. What? Lied your great-grandpap most quickly and dragonfully. Can a princess not lose her head in a minor way occasional without being held up left and right to odium foundment and remonstrance? This I see now, rumbled Sir Libegran in the tone of one who has been cut to his quink, is not the living article I came to deliver at all, but rather an ex-princess in expressly poor condition. I shall enter immediately, exterminate the responsible worm, and remove the carcass work for respectful burial. Your great-grandpap, realizing that this particular deception had run its course, dropped the bony remnants on the stony stoop and raised his voice in high-pitched and apparently remorsive and ruthful squizzling. Oh, good Sir Knight, don't harm us. It's true your princess is a wee bit dead, but through no fault of us. It was a terrible diseasement that terminated her, of which dragon caves are highlishly prone. She caught the sickness and was then rendered lifeless and near decapitate by it within tragical moments. I attempted to convenience you otherwise only to prevent a fine felon like you from suckling at the same deadly treat. After the knight had puddled out your grandsire's words with his poor primate thinker, he said, I do not believe there are diseases which render a princess headless and also cover her with sap and pine needles. It is my counter-suggestion, dragon, that you thrashed her to death with an evergreen of some sort and now seek to confuse me with fear for my own person. But your downfall, dragon, is that even twere so, I cannot do less than march into the mouth of death to honor my quest and the memory of this poor, pine-battered morsel. So, regardless of personal danger, I come forthwith to execute you, scaly Sirrah. Prepare yourself to meet my blameless blade. And so on. Claude the flyest, thought your great-grandpap, but he is a deedly noisome boar for true. Still, he dubited not that Sir Libegran, for all his slathering self-regard, would quickly carry through on his executive intent. Thus, to protect his own beloved and familiar hide for a few moments languorous, your pap proceeded to confect another tongue-forker on the spot. All right, thou hast me dark to tripes, he told the knight. The realio, trulio reason I cannot permit you into my cavernous cavern is that, so caught, I must perforce meet give up to you 3 wishes of immense valuable, for I am that rare and amnesial creature, a magical wishing dragon. Indeed, it was in attempting to claw her way toward my presence and demand wishes from me that your princess gained the preponderosa of these pine burns. For it was with such like furniture of evergreen wood that I attempted pitifulaciously to block my door, and through which she crouched and smushed her way with fearsome strength. Her head was damaged when, after I told her I was fluttered out after a long flight and too weary for wish-wafting, she yanked off her crown and tried to beat me indispensable with it. She was a pittance too rough, though, a girl whose strength belied her scronymus looks, and detached her own head-bone from its neckly couchment in the crown-detaching process, leading to this lamentable lifelessness. However, went on your great-grandpap, warming now to his self-sufficed subject, although I resisted the wish-besieging princess for the honor of all my wormishly magical brethren, since you have caught me, fairy and scary, Sir Libegran, larded me in my baron, as it were, I will grant the forementioned troika of wishes to you. But the magic necessitudes that after you tell them unto my ear, you must go quickly askance as far as possible. Another country would be idealistic, and trouble me no more, so that I can perforce the slow magics of their granting, which sometimes take years betwixt wishing and true coming. Libogran stood a long time, thinking uffishly, then lastly said, "Let me make sure I have apprehended you carefully, Worm. You state that you are a magic wishing dragon, that it was her greed for this quality of yours which cost the unfortunate princess her life, and that I should tell you my 3 wishes and then leave, preferably to a distant land, so that you may grant them to me in the most efficacious manner. Your astuity is matched only by the stately turn of your greave and the general handfulness of your physic, good Sir Knight," your great-grandpap eagerly responded, seeing that perhaps he might escape puncturing at the hands of this remorseless rider after all. "Just bename those wishes, and I will make them factive, both pre and post haste." Sir Libogran slowly shook his massive and broadly head. "Do you take me for a fool, creature?" Not a fool creature of sort," replinked your grandpap's daddy, trying to maintain a cheerful tone. "After all, you and your elk might be a lesser species than us Draco Pulcher, but still, as I would be the first to argue, a ballyhooed part of Claude the Flyest's great creation. Come here, dragon, and let me show you my wish." Your great-grandpap hesitated. "Come there?" he asked. "Why so?" "Because I cannot explain as well as I can demonstrate, sirrah," quoth the bulky and clanksome human. So your forebear slithered out from the cavernous depths, anxious to end his night out by sending this night out. He was also hoping that, although disappointed of his foreplanned feast, he might at least locate some princessly bits fallen off in the cave, which could be served chippingly on toast. But momentarily after your great-grandpap emerged into the lightsome day, the cruel Sir Libogran snatched your ancestor's throat in a gauntleted ham and cut off that poor, insensitive dragon's head with his vicious blade. Snick! No snack. This treacherous done, the knight gathered up the princess's tree-tattered torso and emancive pate, then went galumphing back toward the castle of her mourning, soon to mourn more mammy and daddums. But how can that be, ma'am?" shrimped wee Alexandrax. "He killed great-grandpap? Then how did grandpap, pap, and yours contumely come to be? Fie, fie, shut that O-shaped fish mouth, my breamish boy. Did I say aught about killing? He did not kill your great-grandpap, he cut off his head. Do you not dismember that your great-grandsester was a dragon of the 2-headed variety? As it happened, one of his heads had been feeling poorly, and he had kept it tucked severely under one wing all that day and afternoon, so it could recuperate. Thus, Libogran the Undeflectable was not aware of the existence of this auxiliary knob, which he would doubtless have otherwise liberated from its neck bones along with the other. As it was, the sickened head soon recovered, and was good as new. With time, the severed one also grew back, although it was ever after small, and prone to foolish smiles and the uttering of platitudinous speech, phrases like, "Oh, I am sure everything will work off in the end, and it is onerous just to be nominated," and such like. In times ahead, a phrase which was sorely painful to your great-great-pap during his invalidated renobbing, your GG would go back to his old happy ways, horrorizing harrowers and slurping shepherds, but never again letting himself even veer toward roof-topping virgins, or in fact anything that bore the remotest rumor of the poisonous perfume of princessity. He became a pillar of his community, married your great-grandmammy in a famously fabulous ceremony, just catering the event, purged 3 surrounding counties of their peasantly population, and lived a long and happy life. But ma'am, what about that stark and wormy Sir Libogran, that dragon cytomaniac? Did he really live hoppishly ever after as well, unhaunted by his bloodful crime? In those days there was no justice for our kind except what we made ourselves, my serpentine son. No court or king would ever have evicted him. So he died unpunished? Not exactly. One day your great-grandpap was on his way back from courting your greatest great-grandmam to be, and happened to realize by the banners on its battlements that he was passing over Libegrand's castle. So he stooped to the rooftop and squatted on the chimney pot, warming his hindermost for a moment. A fire was burning in the hearth down below, and it was most pleasantly blazeful, before voiding himself down the chimney hole into the great fireplace. He cooped the flue? He did, my boy, he did. The whole of Libegrand's household came staggering out into the cold night, waving and weeping and coughing out the stinking smoke as your grandpap flew chortling away into the night unseen. Libegrand's castle had to be emptied and aired for weeks during the most freezingly worstful weather of the year, and on this account the knight spent the rest of his life at war with the castle pigeons, on whom he blamed your great-grandpap's secret chimbley discharge. He thought the birds had united for a concerted, guanotated attempt on his life. Thus, stalking a dove across the roof with his bird net and boar spear, a few years later, Sir Libegrand slipped and fell to his death in the castle garden, spiking himself on his own great sticker and dangling thereby for several days, mistaked by his kin and servants as a new scarecrow. Halloo and hooray, ma'am! Was he the last of the dragon hunters, then? Was him stewarding on his own sharpitude the reason we no longer fear them? No, dearest honey sonny, we no longer fear them because they no longer see us. During the hundreds of years since your greatest grandpap's day, a plague called civilization came over them. A diseaseful misery that blinded them to half the creatures of the world and dumbfounded their memories of much that is true and ancient. Let me tell you a dreadsome secret. She leaned close to whisper in his tender ear-hole. Even when we snatch a plump merchant or a lean yet flavorful spinster from their midst these days, the humans never know that one of us dragons has doomfully done for to disappear. They blame it instead on a monster they fear even more. What is that, ma'am? Alexandrax whispered. It fears me to hear, but I want to know. What do they think slaughters them? An odious ogre? A man-munching manticore? Some even more frightful creature. No dragon has ever seen it, but they call it statistics. Claude itself save us from such a horridly horror, squeaked the small one in fright. It is only a man-fancy, like all the rest of their non-descents, murmured his man, empty as the armor of a cracked and slurped knight. So fear it not. Now, my tale is coiled, so sleepish for you, my tender-winged bundle. I will, he said, curling up like a sleepy hoop, most yawnful. I suppose no nights is good nights, huh, ma'am? Examply, my brooded boy. Fear not clanking men nor else. Sleep. All is safe, and I am watching all over you. And indeed, as she gazed, yellow-eyed and loving, on her eggling, the cave soon grew fulfilled with the thunderous rundle of Worm's snore. And that's A Stark and Wormy Night. I hope you enjoyed it. I had great fun writing it. And as I said, I think it's actually a slightly better story when you can read it, because some of the verbal puns don't come through as much in the voice. But who knows? I've read it out loud before. Some of my friends have heard me read it. So it's not like that's the only way. Anyway, so thank you very, very much. I thought I would see if there were any questions or anything that we might want to. Did anybody have any questions? Did anybody want to ask me anything? I've got various things, but I'm not seeing any questions. And I'm looking now. Question: what is your new favorite pandemic house chore? Oh my God. I have not only no favorite pandemic house chores, I have more pandemic house chores than I ever had regular house chores because nobody leaves and everybody is in the same place. And we just killed our sink and disposal today, so yesterday. So I spent most of yesterday and today down on my knees under the sink trying to figure out why water was seeping out all over the place, and eventually hit the limits of my technical expertise, which is not a difficult thing to do. Those limits come up pretty quickly. So I finally realized if I take any more things out, the whole house will probably fall apart. So at this point, I'd better probably try and put it all back together and call somebody who knows what they're doing. So we're going to try and get a plumber visit. Other than that, it's just the normal. If you want to say seriously enjoying, as opposed to merely existing and putting up with. I enjoy cooking, and I'm doing more of it during this thing. I don't think I'm a really super good cook, but I have fairly good sense. So and I tend to kind of make do with whatever we've got around. So it's kind of entertaining to cook, with what you've got and try to make something good out of it. Okay, here's another question from Jerry. The previous question, by the way, was from Brenda. This is from my friend Jerry. Have you done more writing than usual during this pandemic? Actually, good question. I had hoped to, but really, honestly, the only thing the pandemic has done is it's added more stuff onto my day. Because I'm trying to stay in touch with family and friends. I'm trying to stay in touch with the things that people need. I'm running some of the errands because I'm one of the least immunocompromised in the household, although I am old as dirt, and maybe even as old as lying. I don't know. So I go out and run errands when we need them and stuff like that. And so I would like to have written more. I'm kind of writing at about my usual pace. And even there, I've been a little slowed occasionally because of the nature of the particular section of what I'm working on. Those who saw my first reading that I did like 4 weeks ago may remember I was talking about the writer's block and why I don't specifically think writer's block is a big thing, but it's more just a kind of a message from your subconscious telling you you're not ready yet. So I've spent a lot of the last couple of weeks fighting just that particular thing where I was trying to write parts of a story that I wasn't ready to write yet. So altogether, it has kept me from writing as much as I would like. I'm at or a little slower than my normal pace. Anyway. So, which reminds me, this isn't a chore or anything, but you see, where did it go? See this little red mark here on my face, which is actually the scab just came off. It's very typical of the kind of thing that happens around here, which is that one of our useless dogs, all of our dogs are useless, but some are more useless than others. And the absolute prince of disutility is Frank the Chihuahua. Frank the Chihuahua also likes to sleep on people's necks or their boobs. I don't have boobs, but I've got a neck. So Frankie, sleeps across my neck. He's a small little fat Chihuahua, and he likes the warmth and the feeling of the pulse or something, or who knows. Maybe he just likes it because it's annoying. But but what always happens with him is he's lying like that, and then something happens in the other room, and he takes off like Wile E. Coyote, the feet going until he actually makes contact. So when he often winds up doing that on top of my face, I wouldn't mind the face hugger from Alien because at least they just lie there while they're injecting you with their larvae. But Frankie actually runs on your face like the Tasmanian devil. And in the process of going, oh my God, and trying to get him off my face, I actually shaved off a big chunk of my own skin with my fingernail. So that's how my pandemic is going, that sort of thing. I also shaved off the end of my finger the other day trying to root through a box of bathroom toiletries and not realizing that there was a safety razor. Ha ha! in the box until I brought my finger up and I was missing the end of it. So anyway, excitement, excitement. All right, another question. This is from Alexis. Alexis says, how long did you practice the Mad Doctor eyebrow raise? Well, the truth is, even when I was a tiny, tiny little babe, I could raise one eyebrow, and in fact did. And I think when I was yanked timely from my mother's womb and the doctor smote my nether cheeks to cause me to cry out and breathe the sweet air of the world in which I was going to live, after he struck me on the butt, I think that first hour, I think I gave him, really? Really? So, it's something I've been doing a long time. There's no practice involved. I wish the other eyebrow worked as well, but it doesn't. But this is my moneymaker. Okay, let's see if there's anything else here that anybody wants to know. I've got all kinds of funny comments, but they're not really questions. Oh, there was a question. I just zipped past it. Question. When you were a kid, did you drive your teachers batshit? Melissa wants to know. Answer. Yes. Yes. In two ways. One, by being an utter smartass. I am so embarrassed now by what a smartass I was and how I always felt there was, whatever the situation, it would be better if I made some smartass comment. So that was one way. The other way was just because I read a lot and I had a really good memory. So I think the phrase I heard the most times in my elementary school, junior high school life, because by high school I was I wasn't as involved with day-to-day schooling, but junior high school and elementary school, the phrase I heard the most was, "We know you know, Tad. Could somebody else have a chance to answer, please?" So between that and my tendency to make irritating, joking remarks from the back of the room or wherever I was, I'm sure my teachers loathed me. That said, I had some very fine teachers. I had wonderful, wonderful teachers over the years. Liz Lillard, Mrs. Donaday, Mr. Barry, Mr. Moore at junior high school, middle school as it's now called. A lot of really fine teachers. Caliban's Hour is written in large part because I had a really good high school English teacher named Jack Phillips at Palo Alto High School who gave us a course on Shakespeare, and his honest love and enthusiasm for it made me feel like, hey, Shakespeare, I could do Shakespeare. I get it. I think I can figure it out enough to enjoy it and not just read it as a classroom necessity. And in fact did. And within the next 3 or 4 years after that, I read every single Shakespeare play and have gone back to many of them over the years. I did get to tell Mr. Phillips that when I met him once, how big an effect that had had. So I had a lot of very good teachers, and many of them were able to look past my hideous snarkiness and my inability to keep my mouth shut. And I'm very grateful for that because, I'm sure I was a royal pain in the ass. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. And if not, I will just bibble babble for a few more minutes about things. So anyway, okay, if somebody wants to send although now I have no idea where the top is and where the newest thing would come in. It's all happening here on the side. Oh no, that's the back end. Sorry about this, folks. I am still not exactly Mr. Technical here in terms. Oh, okay, yeah, so somebody just wrote something about. Okay, here's a question. What was one of your gateway books that got you into reading and writing epic fantasy? That's a question from Mike. Mike, it was no gateway. I pretty much walked right out the front door when I was a small child and immediately fell in love with fantasy. I first read, or had read to me, a great deal of English children's fiction. So big influences were The Wind in the Willows, the Winnie the Pooh books, the E. Nesbit books, The Phoenix on the Carpet, Five Children in It, all of those kinds of books. And various other things that were either given to me when I was young or which were read to me by mostly my mom. And then when I was about 11, I discovered Lord of the Rings. Not The Hobbit, but Lord of the Rings. And as a result, I've always had that kind of reversal of the way a lot of people were on, reading The Hobbit first as children and then reading The Lord of the Rings. But I fell in love with the complexity and depth of the world building. And also, of course, there's a great romantic sadness to The Lord of the Rings that hit me in my young person's immense romantic sadness, like one of those social media memes about, and 5-year-old me was saying, yeah, how could they, about something ridiculously adult. But it definitely, there I was 11 years old and I was like going, yeah, the elves have been on Earth so long and now they're having to leave and nobody appreciates them. And, that's like, it's a freaking fourth grader or whatever. But the fact is it had a huge effect on me. And then very soon thereafter, between maybe 11 and 13 or 14, I found a lot of other wonderful works. I found a lot of science fiction. I had already read Bradbury and some Asimov and Heinlein, but then I began to read some of the newer science fiction writers like Theodore Sturgeon and Harlan Ellison and Roger Zelazny and Ursula Le Guin and Michael Moorcock, Fritz Leiber, Philip K. Dick, and that kind of, it all snowballed from there. And it's one of the reasons I've always loved both science fiction and fantasy, because I fell in love with both of them slightly separately. But a lot of the favorite writers of mine were people who, like Sturgeon, like Ellison, like Le Guin, who kind of freely wandered back and forth between the two. In those days, marketing was not such a big issue, and you didn't have to decide ahead of time how you were going to market a book. You wrote the book, and then somebody tried to figure out. And since they were all only going to sell, 8,000 paperbacks, it didn't matter. But anyway, so all these great writers that were in their prime as I was starting to become a really avid reader of fantasy and science fiction. So there wasn't really a gateway, Mike. It just kind of, I just started mainlining from a very early age. And in fact, one of the things I've thought of is when I run out of the right size stories of mine to read, if we're all still locked down, I may start reading some of my old favorites from childhood, like The Wind in the Willows or like some of the Winnie the Pooh stories, which, that's where I learned irony, was from Eeyore. That's why my generation discovered irony, because we grew up on Eeyore. So there's things like that I would love to be able to share, because they meant so much to me and they amused and entertained me so much. And or Mr. Toad in The Wind in the Willows, who is just such a wonderful character. My mom first read me the books, and we identified with him really strongly. And Mr. Toad, his kind of ridiculous, brazen self-regard and all that stuff. We loved him. And I remember one of my fondest childhood memories, actually, is that when we were reading the part where Toad is in jail for his very bad motor car driving, he becomes friendly with the jailer's daughter, the jailkeeper's daughter. And at one point, she takes pity on poor Toad and brings him hot buttered toast. And I will never forget how, without a word, my mother and I, at that point in the story, just looked at each other, and then we both went, toast, and got up and went to the other room and made a big plate of hot buttered toast and brought it back and went back to reading the story. So that's probably one of the reasons I became a writer. I probably thought that people would bring me toast all the time if I just kept writing stories. Okay, another question. Andrea says, no, that's Andrea saying, good one, Brenda, which isn't really a question. How are you staying grounded? Andrea asks. Andrea, it's been a long time. I can't remember if it's Andrea or Andrea. I had a friend also named Andrea. I think it's Andrea. Anyway, how am I staying grounded? I'm not. I'm pretty much always grounded, because I rather just be by myself or with my family, writing stories, slanging the dogs, slanging the children, especially now that they're young adults and they can't really do much. Because if they say, Dad, you're being mean, I go, fine, move out, go live in the pandemic. Not that we'd ever actually throw them out, but don't tell them. So anyway, but I don't know what's grounded. I'm one of those people who's actually very happy being on his own, writing, and only going out. Now I have friends that I love very much, and friends that I like seeing and all that, and but I can go long stretches just on my own, or with just me and Deborah, or me and Deborah and the kids, because I've got my work. And one of the great things about having something to do that fills your mind is it's always a place you can go when something else isn't going well, or it's just boring, or you're feeling, you've been inside for too long. It's like if you got a project, you can go in your mind to the project. And I always have writing projects, and I usually have more writing projects than I have time for. So there you go. So that's me staying grounded. And then Emily asked a question. Some of us with sensitive minds are not doing so okay. Any thoughts? And, I'm not a qualified mental health professional, but I can tell you this from personal experience. You got to connect with your peeps. You got to connect with friends. You have to find ways to keep yourself on some kind of ordinary keel. You really need to connect with people, even if it's just on the phone, or even just, emails, texts, whatever. It helps to have projects. It doesn't you don't have to be writing a novel. You could be doing what our daughter is doing. She's become very interested in sewing in the last few years. And particularly during this pandemic, she's like working at it all the time. She's trying to invent things and learn how to do new things. And so projects will keep you going. I'm not the best person to ask because I live like this most of the time, except for the not being able to go out and have a meal with a friend. I'm pretty much home 7 days a week, most days, most weeks. But I do think that the human touch is absolutely crucial, and having something to do is absolutely crucial, and extending some time to other people, which can be both of the first two, but saying to yourself, hey, I've got people out there, they're probably going through what I'm going through, and they're bored, or they're actually depressed, or whatever, and it wouldn't hurt to contact them and say, hey, how are you doing? And for a little while, get away from my own stuff, if only to be there for them, because we all sometimes need to complain, bitch. For instance, just today, Deborah and I had a call with a friend of ours, Ruth. And, to be honest, most of what we talked about is we both have like kids in their 20s. She's got 2 of them, and we have 4 at this time. And so we were sort of talking about like what 20-something-year-olds don't get, what are the lessons of adulthood that they have not yet picked up. And how that affects us in our household with all these galumphing 20-something young people around, leaving dirty dishes in the sink or whatever, walking past the puddle of dog pee on the floor without even seeing it because they're, looking into their Game Boy or whatever it might be, or their phone. So, and that's not only do we, obviously we love Ruth and love talking to her, but it's also just good to like be able to go, I am going nuts. I am so tired of this crap, and blah, blah, blah. And my kids and their little thugs and blah, or whatever it is that you need to express. So that's my main suggestion. But contact with other people, and fairly regularly have something to look forward to. Make a date with a friend and say, okay, well, we're not going to talk today, but how about Thursday? Are you around? Make a phone conversation. And eventually this will end. And we will all make it through and out the other side. I have no qualms about that. And hopefully we will all have learned some very important things, not just about ourselves and how much boredom and confinement we can put up with, because you could, if that's all you wanted to learn, you could just go rob a liquor store and turn yourself in. But what is important for our society, and I'm not just talking about Americans here, I'm talking about everybody, every human being, What's important about interacting with our environments, both the environments we built for ourselves and the larger environment that we live in, the planet. There's a number of useful things, and I hope we won't forget this when this epidemic is over and things go back to normal. And I hope we'll be saying things like, well, now that I'm not trapped in the house, what about people who are? What about the friends and relatives and acquaintances that I have who are housebound or invalid in some ways? So, there are always things to do, and it's important to keep doing things, whatever those things might be. Also, last thing, do remember, we can go out. My kids don't seem to realize this. They're like, nope, it's COVID-19 and we're never leaving the house again. And I'm like, the sun is up. It's spring here in California. We could take the dogs and go to the park and just avoid anybody else by, a sufficiency of 10 feet or so. And, that the whole real world is still out there. And Deborah and I, for instance, most nights go out in the backyard and listen to the frogs that have taken over what used to be a swimming pool and is now an involuntary. Well, no, we decided to let it happen. It's a frog pond now, and it's great. We listen to the frogs, we listen to the owls. So you may not be somewhere where you can do that, but at least you can go out and look at the sky. The sky is a pretty amazing thing. Not everybody has one. A lot of people can't get out, so enjoy the one you got. Anyway, but the main thing is that, keep joining me here on Sundays also, Emily, and I'll try and do some other times as well. And, I'm very happy to be here and share with people. I'm thrilled that I have people to share with, here online. And I will be here. I will keep being here until we are back to normal. And even then, I'll probably keep doing it because I found out how to do it and, all that stuff. So don't despair. Keep your chin up. Keep your eyes on the prize, and we'll get through it together somehow. So with that, I'm going to make one last troll through for any other questions. Dun, 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 dun. Am I going backwards or forwards? No. Okay. Yeah, no, I already got that question. I already got your question to Alexis, you troublemaker. Okay. Well, it looks like I've gotten most of them, or I've missed some, but that's okay because I'll be back. I'll be back next week. Be aware, those of you who are watching this, because of the fact that I want to start doing more stuff for the non-US time zone, I might start doing those late Sunday night. And as I found out last week, it's really hard on my voice to read especially two long stories in the same night. So I may push this US time zones reading back to Saturday and then do late Sunday night, early Monday morning for the European crowd. So I will post stuff about that on Facebook and Twitter, and Deborah, I'm sure, will post stuff because she is the Twitter maven. She is the Twitter queen. So anyway, thank you, by the way, Emily. Thank you for telling me that and giving me a follow-up on that. I'm very glad to hear it. I just saw your message, and that makes me feel good for you. So go get them. And that is basically it. Alexis, I saw that. I'm ignoring you because if I didn't ignore you, I would have to don my final form and then defeat you. And God knows what that would do to your self-respect, as well as it would get my final form all messy. So, okay. So now I've read all the stuff in the sides, and I don't really have a last homily, except to say that, please feel free to send questions or whatever. I'll try to find ways to do these things more spontaneously, maybe get some of the questions onto the live feed itself instead of me having to read them. But the main thing is that I will be back next week, sometime in the weekend. I will try to inform you. It's either going to be Saturday at 7 or Sunday at 7. So I will try to make it known to those who want to hang out. I thank you very much for your time. I urge you all to keep taking good care of yourselves and your near and dear ones, your family and your created families. And I will see you soon. And I hope you are all well and stay well. In fact, I'll make that an order. Stay well, all of you. and want to send love from our house to all of yours everywhere.